show off video for this recording. Because we are recording it and potentially sending this out, we just want to make sure that everything is good to go. It also helps with the connectivity issues. Okay, so it's 11 o'clock. We'll go ahead and get started. I am sharing my screen here. I hope you all can see that. We will be going through our student teaching self-paced orientation module. So we did go ahead and pop that link into the chat. That is something that you can follow along with today, and then you will have access to this orientation module up until student teaching, during student teaching, even after student teaching. My name is Julianne Brett. I am the Director of Clinical Practice here in the College of Education. So again, just a few quick points before we dive in. Please do go ahead and put yourself on mute and remain in that muted status for the duration of today's presentation. We will also have an opportunity here at the very end to ask any additional questions. We will be going over quite a bit of information today, and I understand it's in a very quick time frame. So please go ahead and hold your questions until the end, or you can pop them into the chat box there. We do have our clinical practice manager, Dusty, helping out to monitor the chat. And then you all will continue to receive emails regarding the student teaching experience up until your student teaching start date, and then also during your student teaching. Those emails will include a link to the self-paced orientation module, also our student teaching resources on the Student Success Center. So just keep an eye out in your email. Always know if you have updated your email address, you want to make sure that you're updating it on file with GCU as well, so you're getting the most up-to-date communications. I also wanted to start off by congratulating you all. You're soon transitioning to that final phase of your degree. We know it's been quite an interesting ride these past few semesters, and we hope that you're continuing to stay safe and healthy out there across the nation. You'll see here on the slide, this does reference fall 2021 currently, since we're still in that semester, but the same guidelines will be in place for your spring 2022 semester. Really, we want to just be mindful that as much as we were hopeful that we would be out of the pandemic and all of the restrictions and things that come with it, we are still seeing that across the nation, there's different policies in place with the districts. So, and school sites. Just be mindful that wherever you're placed, you want to make sure that you're following their district and site placements. Requirements regarding any type of restrictions or vaccines, any and all district and school site policies we want our students to be following, and they just vary across the board, you know, depending on what location you're placed at. Okay, down here towards the bottom are the topics that we'll be covering today. We'll talk a little bit about who we are as a College of Education and what we believe. We'll certainly spend a good bulk of the time talking about the experience itself and what to expect. Our expectations of you out there in the field as GCU College of Education candidates. We'll also introduce you to our Professional Learning Network, our Exemplary Teacher Candidate Award, and our COE Pledge and Promise. So again, please know that I'm going to be going over a lot of information in a little bit of time, but you have access to all of this information at the ready. So you have this link whenever you want to go and pop back into it. You also will have your field experience counselors and your teacher placement counselors to help answer any additional questions. As the College of Education, we have our conceptual framework here. You'll see that it is centers around the learning, leading, and serving model. So throughout your program, you've been doing the learning component. Of course, this includes all of your coursework, the lectures, the discussion questions. Really, it's all of that knowledge and all of those skills that you've been learning about and gaining from your coursework. The leading is what we hope you're all doing out there while working in the field during your practicum hours. You're really leading by example and representing GCU well. And finally, the serving component is based on our rich Christian heritage, of course. We here at GCU, we do truly feel that teaching and education, it's that service-oriented profession, and we're really all called to serve the broader educational community. So it's not just a job, but a passion and a calling. It's also very important to point out that our quality teacher education preparation program, it really couldn't exist without the cooperation and the partnerships with those school districts and school sites across the nation. We do understand that successful teaching and preparation to become an educator, it does require that teamwork and cooperation from all parties involved. So that includes those here at GCU, as well as the school site cooperating teachers, the principals, the district HRs. Everyone really works together to see that you have a successful student teaching experience, and then you can go on out to graduation, gain certification, and have that classroom of your own one day. So here on this page, we do just list out some of those specific support roles. You'll see here first is the teacher placement counselor. This is often referred to as your TPC. And this is going to be the individual here at GCU that works to intake that student teaching application and then communicate with the district or the school site in order to confirm the student teaching placement for you. And then they will work as your support system during that student teaching experience. So if you have any questions regarding the experience or your placement, you can always reach out to your teacher placement counselor. The cooperating teacher or the mentor teacher is going to be that certified teacher at the school site in whose classroom you're spending the majority of your time for the experience. So again, this is often referred to in the abbreviation of a CT, cooperating teacher, or CT. They're going to be your primary go-to for questions, guidance, feedback, and overall support there at the school site. So many of you are probably still waiting to hear back on your placement, as well as who your cooperating teacher is. That is not uncommon at this point in the process. Just know that as soon as we have that information from the school site, our teacher placement counselors will share that with you. Each of you will also be assigned to a GCU faculty supervisor. This is going to be one of our faculty members here who will be evaluating your teaching performance a total of 4 times throughout the student teaching experience. And we'll talk a little bit more about the faculty supervisor role and that evaluation process here later on in the presentation. All of our student teachers are also enrolled in an online student teaching course, or 2 separate courses if you're in one of our dual programs. You'll have a course instructor just like you have for any other class. They will help answer any questions about the coursework. They will participate in the discussion forum, and they will be the ones to provide you with that overall score for the student teaching course. And then finally, we have our Office of Clinical Practice. This is the department in which I work, and we do help to provide training and support to those professionals in the field. So we provide training to your cooperating teacher, to your faculty supervisor, and we have a team of clinical field experience specialists that help to answer any questions that those roles have. So if your cooperating teacher has any questions about the experience, they can reach out to our Office of Clinical Practice. Here on this slide, you'll see a direct link to our Student Success Center. We hope that you are familiar with this hub. It does hold many, many resources to help you out throughout your program. We do have a specific section for student teaching, or what you may hear referred to as clinical practice. So one of the first things you want to make sure that you're doing is visit our Student Success Center and go through those resources that are available to you. We do have a student teaching manual. It is several pages long, and it will really walk you through the expectations for student teaching, much like this orientation module. So make sure you take a good, thorough look at all of those resources there. You will be expected to adhere to those procedures and policies within that document. So for the sake of time, we're not going to pull that up, but do know that is available for your reference. Okay, as I mentioned, you do have that online course. So you'll either have one course if you're in our single placement program, such as our Masters of Elementary Ed or our Masters of Special Education. Some of our dual programs, for instance, our elementary special education undergraduate degree or master's degree, our early childhood or our early childhood special education programs. You will have 2 different online courses that align to those 2 different settings you'll be required to complete your student teaching within. So you'll see here a general overview of your online course. Now, of course, you'll have more information regarding the course via the course syllabus as soon as you get access to that class. But generally speaking, you're going to have the discussion questions, much like you would any other course. The one difference in student teaching is that you only have 1 weekly discussion question to complete rather than the typical 2. You will also work on what we refer to as the student teaching evaluation of performance. And you'll hear that referred to as the STEP. And this is essentially an assignment that you'll be working on in pieces over the course of your online course. And it's really a work sample. So you'll demonstrate your ability to plan, deliver, and assess a standard-based instructional sequence. So you'll be implementing a unit, you'll analyze your student learning, and you'll do some reflection on your instruction and discuss, how you can improve that learning and your performance moving forward. All of our students also complete an online professional portfolio. So way back in the day, whenever I completed my own student teaching, we were putting those physical portfolios together. Now with the advancement of technology, that is done online, so it will be a digital portfolio. You will have access to resources on how to complete that. We have some options on platforms you might use, but it's really up to you what system or platform you want to use to create that digital portfolio. There will also be 2 video assignments. So you'll be expected to video yourself implementing an activity or a lesson from your unit plan. And then the additional video is you just speaking to the camera and providing a reflection on your personal teaching philosophy. All students, again, are evaluated by that GCU faculty supervisor. So you'll have 4 total clinical practice evaluations completed. The supervisor is responsible for completing those evaluations. They will go into your portal and then you will upload those to your online course. So more about that here in a few pages. And then you all will need to be documenting the days that you complete in the classroom. That goes on a clinical practice time log. And then that gets attached to those evaluations in order for those to go into the course to your course instructor. One additional thing to point out here is if you are in a special education program, you also have the IEP performance template to complete. So that is where you'll be kind of doing like a mock IEP, and you will have an additional video assignment where you are videoing yourself holding a mock IEP meeting. So for our special education candidates, you just have a few additional components there. And down here in the bottom in bold writing, because we are asking you to video yourself in the classroom, we do require that you are passing out video recording permission request forms to each of the students in your classroom and obtaining their parent or guardian signature and making sure that you have the permission to record. So that video recording permission request form, it is located on the Student Success Center. Some of you may find that the district already has their own video recording permission slips, or that is already on file. We do ask that you also go ahead and get our GCU specific form signed. You do not need to turn that into your course. You don't need to turn it into your counselor. You just want to hold on to those for your records. So it might always be a good idea to maybe create a student teaching file and just hold them in there throughout the experience. Okay, so now we'll dive into your expectations as a student teacher, or what we refer to as a teacher candidate. Once you begin your placement, you'll see here 1 through 4, some of the responsibilities that you'll want to make sure that you're sticking to. First and foremost, you want to make sure that you're communicating with that cooperating teacher. You want to remember that the relationship that you're building with he or she, it's really going to be critical because they are your support there. They are there to mentor you through the experience. Make sure that you're asking questions, you're running things by them before you're implementing them in the classroom. Ultimately, you are the guest in their classroom, so you always want to make sure you're requesting their advice and their feedback. And you want to remember too, to take their feedback or their criticism with an open mind. You do not want to take it defensively. They are there to see you through this experience and to help you become that better educator. So again, it's just helpful to take that as a roadmap to your success rather than take it personally or get defensive. Really try to use that feedback on reflecting on how you can better your overall performance. Of course, you will be able to shadow and apply their skills and methods. They all come with years of experience in the classroom. So you want to, observe what they're doing in their own classroom and use it as a sense of modeling. You'll want to be sure to understand and follow related ethical standards. Certainly, we have our professional dispositions and our expectations of you out in the field. We do, hope that you are adhering to all of those policies and procedures and just really upholding that ethical responsibility of an educator. And finally, here, number 4, you'll have full responsibility of the classroom for the minimum required weeks. This is what we call that full takeover time frame, where you are responsible for taking on or mirroring the cooperating teacher's full duties. So again, this experience is really in place to give you the practice of what it's going to be like to have your own classroom. So you do want to have that full takeover of the classroom. And we say for 50% of the time. So we'll go over that here again in a few slides in a little bit more detail. But it does really all come with that readiness to accept responsibility. Each of you will have a slightly different learning curve depending on how much experience you've already had in the classroom. Of course, all of you have completed practicum hours and have had those interwoven throughout your coursework. But some of you may have had more experience than others. Maybe you've already been working in the classroom as a parapro or have done additional volunteering. Some of you may even already be teachers of record. So it's really just expected that you do draw upon all of the previous coursework that you've taken throughout your program of study and any of that additional experience, and you start to implement all of that in the classroom, and you start to have your own individual professional style so you are ready whenever you do go out and have your own classroom. And then here are just some additional bullets on a successful student teaching experience. In keeping in communication with your cooperating teacher, you also want to do the same with your faculty supervisor. So you'll just want to make sure that you're communicating with that faculty supervisor on a regular basis. I would say that it's pretty common for our candidates to maybe just have a touching point every week or so. And then they will also be reaching out to you to schedule those observations and post conferences, which we'll talk about here in a moment. It's also expected that you maintain the responsibilities of your coursework. So one thing we really hate to see happen is whenever you're doing wonderfully out there in the field, everything's going well, but for whatever reason, you're not keeping up with that online coursework. A failing grade in the course would require you to complete the entire experience again. So just make sure you're keeping in communication with that course instructor as well, if you have any questions or have any concerns about the coursework. So make sure that you're uploading all of your assignments to the appropriate spaces in your LoudCloud or your Halo classroom, the digital classroom. And then again, just communicating with that course instructor if you have any issues within the course. So you may have heard student teaching referred to as a semester-long job interview, and that really does hold some truth. You know, these school sites, the principals, they're all going to have their eye on you with that potential of how they might use you in the future. You know, could they hire you on as a full-time teacher of record at the end of your experience? So you do want to be very purposeful with those first impressions and then also throughout the experience. Just make sure that you're introducing yourself, not just to the cooperating teacher, but maybe some other key players there on campus. For instance, along with your cooperating teacher and your supervisor, think through how you might introduce yourself to, of course, the students within your classroom, their parents or guardians. Of course, again, as a guest in the classroom, you always want to make sure that you're following the school site policies and the cooperating teacher expectations. So prior to implementing anything or introducing yourself to students and parents, just make sure you run that plan through the cooperating teacher. Also consider how you're going to introduce and interact with the grade level team or your department. Of course, the principal and any office staff. So just make sure you go in with a positive and professional demeanor, that you're friendly with everyone, and just really go into it with an open mind, and be very thankful that they've allowed their school site and their classrooms to be open to you. So you may be thinking about the cooperating teacher and thinking about, how to introduce yourself to him or her. What are some things you want to make sure that you speak to them about? So we have here a bulleted list. Now, this is not everything that you can speak to them about, but these are just some conversation starters. So you'll want to learn about their school philosophy, of course, go over those policies. You can certainly look at a calendar, go over your daily schedule. One of the things that I recommend that all student teachers do is one of the first conversations with your cooperating teacher is to pull out that district calendar and come up with a tentative starting date and then a tentative ending date. So you know exactly the day you're going to start. You'll have either 70 or 75-day requirement, depending on your program of study. Now that may be broken into two if you're in a dual program, but you can kind of use that calendar to come up with a tentative end date. Just remember, any days that you do miss, you might be absent, they would have to be tacked on in order to meet that full-time requirement. You'll want to discuss their expectations of you regarding dress, your behavior, even housekeeping items such as where do you park, how do you get your badge, so on and so forth. You can discuss their reporting and their record keeping, their grading standards, their discipline procedures, of course, the curriculum that you'll be teaching or the content to be covered, what instructional materials you might be using. Are you using textbooks? Are you using ebooks? What does that look like? The cooperating teacher's expectations for their students and the classroom routines. And then again, of course, the standards and the district scope and sequence. So again, these are just some points that you'll definitely want to discuss with the cooperating teacher, but I'm sure more and more will come up as you have those continued conversations. Okay, as I was just mentioning, all students do have a particular time requirement, and the way we look at it here at GCU is days. So we count days. You'll be logging your days in the classroom. If you're in one of our single placements, you'll have to complete 70 days in that student teaching placement. If you're in one of our dual placements, you're going to complete 35 to 40 days in each placement for a total minimum of 75 days. And then some of our older programs, there's not going to be many of you, but some of you in one of our older programs where you're only in one placement, but you have two courses, that is a 75-day requirement. Now, I do understand this might be a little bit confusing and you might not know which one of these applies to you. If you are not sure, you can refer to the student teaching manual that does break it down program by program. Or just reach out to your field experience counselor or your teacher placement counselor, and they can go over with you how many days you're required to document. So we get asked, well, what does that mean? What does the day mean? You are able to count or document on your time log any traditional student day. So any day that you're going in and the students are present and it's a traditional instructional classroom day, you are expected to be there for the full day and you can count that. There are also days when the students may not be in attendance, but your cooperating teacher is contracted to be there. You want to also be there, and you can also count that as one of your days. So for instance, if you're placed at a school site and maybe they have, just making this up here, Wednesdays off, the students have Wednesdays off, but it is a professional development day and the cooperating teacher is contracted to be there, you also want to go in and you would count that as a day. What you cannot count towards your time log is any day that the school is closed. So any district holidays or inclement weather days, if school is not in session and the teacher, and the cooperating teacher is not contracted to be there, then you would not count that. So again, one of the first things you could do is pull out that district calendar, start with your start date, and then count how long it's going to take you to get to that 70 or 75 day requirement, keeping in mind any district holidays. And then here, these bullets will break down a day in the life of a teacher candidate. So what does that student teaching day typically look like? First and foremost, one thing you want to keep in mind, again, is that this experience is preparing you to be that full-time educator. So we do expect that you are following that cooperating teacher's schedule. So when they are contracted to be at this school site up until when they're contracted to end their school day, you should also be in attendance. So we're going to follow the cooperating teacher's contracted hours. You'll want to make sure that you're participating in any of those morning or after school duties. Again, this is in preparation to be that full-time educator, and they do have those additional responsibilities and duties. You'll utilize any of the prep periods for planning, reflection, and lesson preparation. These prep periods should not be used to work on your online class assignments. Your class assignments really should be completed outside of the school day, as that school day is dedicated to the students and preparing for their instruction. Of course, throughout the day, you will also be working with that cooperating teacher. When possible, you're going to discuss your progress. You're going to ask them questions. You're going to work with them to plan. If there is a need for you to be absent, you want to make sure that you're communicating with that cooperating teacher and your faculty supervisor as soon as possible. When possible, to do that well in advance. And keep in mind, these cooperating teachers are counting on you. So if you are in that full takeover mode, or if you are expected to teach a lesson and you're going to be out, be mindful of that and have those substitute plans ready to go so you're not leaving anyone hanging. And then finally here, as I discussed, any days that you are absent or that you do miss, they will have to be tacked on to the end in order to meet that minimum time requirement. Okay, so again, I know this is a lot of information very quickly. So we do have resources available to you. We have our suggested takeover schedules. These are going to walk you week by week through kind of like a tentative schedule of what you should be doing. Now, we understand every placement's going to look a little bit different. So these are suggested takeover schedules. If you can't adhere to it, exactly, that's okay. But generally speaking, this is the order in which you should be doing things. So we really kind of look at student teaching as what we refer to as a phase in, a full takeover, and then a phase out. So during those initial few weeks, you're going to get to know the cooperating teacher. You will get to know your classroom of students, really become acclimated to the school site. Then you will start to phase in to take over a class period or a lesson at a time. And then you're going to work your way up to that full takeover, where for the minimum required weeks, you are responsible for everything in the classroom from the start to the end of the day. And then towards the end of the experience, you'll start to give some of that responsibility back to your cooperating teacher, and you'll phase out. So within the last couple of weeks, you'll start to kind of give the responsibility in the classroom time back to the cooperating teacher, and you'll phase out of the experience. Our requirement is that you have that full takeover for 50% of the time. So if you're in one of our dual programs, your sessions are going to be 8 weeks long. So 4 out of those 8 weeks should really be in that full takeover time frame. If you're in one of our 15 or 16-week placements, about 8 weeks of that should be in that full takeover time frame. So again, for sake of time, we're not going to pull up these takeover schedules. However, do know that you can come back here, you can download it and then save this. This is also within our student teaching manual. It not only gives you a breakdown, but it also gives your cooperating teacher a breakdown of how they can help you week by week. So these are divided up between either dual placement, which is those 8-week sessions, or our single placements. So again, you will be required to document the time that you're spending in the classroom. This is just a screenshot of what the log looks like. This is going to be a paper document. So you can grab this from this module. It'll link you right to those. They are available on our Student Success Center. So you'll just click on the applicable document. You'll print that out. And then for each day that you're there, you will mark an X. If you're absent or you only complete a partial day, you'll use the key to know exactly how to document that day. You'll also, at the end of each week, have your cooperating teacher initial and just verify the days you've tracked. Your cooperating teacher and your GCU faculty supervisor will also sign off on this document. So your supervisor will reach out to you and they'll let you know, okay, I need to have you send me your clinical practice time log. And then they will attach that to your evaluation. Your final evaluation will not get submitted until you've completed all of your required days. So here on the next few pages, we detail our student teaching expectations and our academic standards. So these are really just our expectations of you during the experience and out there in the field. Again, for sake of time, I'm not going to read through these, but do know that they are listed here on this module. They can also be found in our student teaching manual, as well as our university policy handbook. So several places that you can go. Just make sure that you take a good read through so you understand our expectations. Along with those academic standards, we also expect you to be abiding by our professional dispositions. You should be familiar with these, as these are embedded throughout your program. But these are really those standards around professionalism and how you're acting there in the classroom, not only with your students, but also the entire school staff. These 10 dispositions, they will be the items that you are evaluated on in that very first evaluation as well. And then here at the bottom, we did adopt the Model Code of Ethics for Educators. So these are actually a national set of standards that all educators should be abiding by. So again, for sake of time, I'm not going to click in here, but please do familiarize yourself with them. They are broken up by principles. And one of the principles is in regards to the ethical use of technology. That is an important one to pay attention to, just so you understand the responsibilities of an educator and what is and is not appropriate in regards to technology. One of my top tips for you, because I know social media is prevalent, is just to make sure that you're cleaning up that social media, you're making yourself private, you're not friending your students. You know, as an educator, we are held to high standards, and we want to just make sure that what we put out there into the world throughout technology is what you would be okay with talking and discussing with any person face to face as well. And then last but not least here, we also have our essential elements and essential functions for educators. And these are really the key pieces or the key characteristics that our educators are expected to abide by in today's classrooms. So for sake of time, we're not going to read through each of these, but please do take some time on your own to make sure you review these. And then if you have any questions or concerns about being able to meet one of these areas, make sure you're having that conversation with your counselor. Okay, so we're going to dive a little bit in here to the GCU faculty supervisor. Again, this is going to be one of our adjunct faculty members who is contracted to observe and evaluate your teaching performance 4 times throughout the student teaching experience. So if you're in one of our dual programs, they will observe you twice in your first session and then twice in your second session. If you're in one of our single placement programs, it will be all 4 times in that one single setting. For each of your observations, you will be expected to prepare a lesson, and the supervisor will observe you teaching that lesson. So you'll want to make sure that you're communicating with the supervisor and scheduling those observation dates. Now, typically speaking, pre-pandemic, our supervisors would come physically into the classrooms to observe you. However, for the safety of all parties involved, and because there are still restrictions in place across the nation, depending on where you're located and what district or school site you're working with, we have transitioned for the time being. All of our supervisors will be observing you virtually. So they will communicate with you and work with you on what looks or how that looks depending on your school site. So they may be scheduling Zoom or Google Meets time with you. They might ask you to record the video and send it to them. So that's just going to look a little bit different depending on the preference of your school site. But along with communicating with your supervisor, you will want to make sure that after those observations, you're participating in what we refer to as the post-conference. And that's going to be held with you, the teacher candidate, your cooperating teacher, and then also the supervisor. So that meeting will take place after the observation. It might be directly after, or it might be, later that day or the next day. It just depends on the scheduling. We do understand that cooperating teachers and our student teachers often have to get back into the classroom and working with their students. So you'll just schedule the best time for all 3 of you on when you'll hold the post-conference. You'll discuss how the lesson went, what things are going well, and maybe some areas in which you can improve upon. Upon completion of that conference, your supervisor will go back and complete the clinical practice evaluation. That is an electronic document. So once your supervisor is completed with it, you will receive a copy into your student portal. So here on this page, we just have a visual of that process. So first, again, you're going to communicate with your supervisor ahead of time. You'll talk about the lesson that you're preparing that he or she will observe. The supervisor will then observe you teaching that lesson. You'll hold that collaborative post-conference with the three of you, your supervisor, yourself, and the collaborating teacher. The supervisor will then evaluate you, and then you can access the completed evaluation in your student portal. You'll want to make sure that you download a copy of that and then put that into your online classroom. That's an important piece. You want to make sure that you are submitting a copy of that evaluation in the appropriate spot in your online classroom, so your instructor can then take the grade from the evaluation and put that into the grade book. One quick item to point out here at the bottom, for your very final evaluation, evaluation number 4, you're going to receive 2 different documents in your student portal. You'll get the evaluation itself, and then you will also get a 1-page score addendum with that final score. You just want to make sure that both of those items go into your online classroom. We certainly recommend that you also look at the evaluations ahead of time so you understand what you will be evaluated on. You can access copies of the evaluation by clicking here on these links. They are located on our Student Success Center. Again, that first evaluation is going to cover those 10 professional dispositions. The second and third evaluation will go over the INTAS standards, or those primary teaching standards. And then the fourth evaluation, it is summative, so it covers it all: the professional dispositions, the INTAS standards, and then also the specialized program standards. So those standards are based on your particular content area. For instance, perhaps you're in our secondary program and English is your content, it would be on those English standards. Or you're in our elementary program, it is on those elementary content standards. Along with these evaluations, we also have a resource in our Student Success Center, the self-evaluations. So that's always good practice as well. You can pop into that Student Success Center, download a self-evaluation, and you can really evaluate yourself ahead of time or even after, just to kind of get used to those standards and what is expected of you. We thought it was also important to provide you with the scoring guide. So I know it might be a little bit small here on my screen, but for every single standard that you are assessed on, we do have this same scoring guide. You'll see it goes from 0 of no evidence all the way up to distinguished. One thing to point out here is that our target area for you to hit as a student teacher is not here at this top level. This is really reserved for those master teacher candidates. You might score here, you know, for some standards, but typically as a student teacher, you're still very much in that learning phase. You're not going to live here for every single standard. More typically, this is the target area that we would expect of you at this point in your educational career. So do not get discouraged. I know oftentimes, you know, you might have a really high grade in other classes, and sometimes it can just feel a little defeating if you're not scored in that tippy top level, but that's okay. Again, this is a learning experience. You're still, you know, out there learning, and oftentimes don't have years and years of experience in the field. So it's not expected of you to have mastered every skill as of yet. You know, here at GCU, we did provide one of our favorite quotes: "The life of a teacher begins the day you realize that you are always a learner." So we really do hold that belief of being lifelong learners. We'll just briefly discuss our professional growth plans and unsuccessful student teaching attempts. The majority of our teacher candidates do just fabulously out there in the field, everything goes well, and then they're on to graduation. But from time to time, there may be a time where your supervisor comes to you and discusses a professional growth plan. This is really just an extra layer of targeted support if they see some areas in which you can improve upon. So the professional growth plan, it's referred to as a PGP. It's not punitive. It doesn't necessarily affect your grade or anything. It's just, again, more targeted support and areas for which you can focus on in order to have that successful attempt. If for whatever reason you do have an unsuccessful attempt, one of these bulleted areas may apply. So you might be removed from the student teaching course. You may receive a failing grade or a withdrawal from the course. Depending on the severity of the issue, we may ask that you complete a personal improvement plan or a remediation plan to get you ready for that second and final attempt. So it really just depends on the reason that you've had the unsuccessful attempt, but we do review those unsuccessful attempts as a committee, and then we vote on the best next steps. But again, we don't like to focus on that because the majority of our candidates get in there, they remain professional and positive, they understand this is an opportunity for them to observe from professionals in the field and really get their feet wet in doing the duties of that cooperating teacher. And they move right along to graduation without a problem. But we do like to point out that we certainly do have our expectations and our programmatic requirements. So you do want to adhere to those so you prevent having that unsuccessful attempt. Okay, and then on the next several pages, I'm just going to buzz right by these for the sake of time, but we do have here several different pages of tips and tricks and resources on a couple different topic areas. So you'll see here we have a section on accepting feedback. We also have several pages on lesson planning. We know that lesson planning is a big part of teaching and of the student teaching experience. So we do have, again, several resources. There is also a section here about classroom management. Now, this is an area in which I would say is the biggest challenge sometimes for our student teachers, and that's okay and not unheard of. Remember that this is the first time that you're really getting in there with these classrooms of students. Good news is you're going to have that cooperating teacher, and you're really going to be able to learn from him or her those different classroom management techniques and skills. So again, just more pages here on creating positive environments, some tips and tricks for that first week of school. Here too, most typically speaking, we have our student teachers going back into the field, going back into those physical classrooms and working with those cooperating teachers and students. However, due to the pandemic, we know we had to transition there for a moment, and some of our student teachers were working in that more virtual environment. In the case that you have been approved to work in a virtual academy, or you are completing maybe a hybrid situation where your school site and the cooperating teacher is doing some days in the classroom and some days virtually, we just wanted to make sure we gave you some additional resources on what professionalism and classroom management looks like in that virtual environment. So know that you can certainly come back and reference this resource as well. Again, just additional tips. And then here, as we get towards the end of our self-paced module, we have our professional learning network. This is going to just be an additional website or additional hub that you can go to for those teacher resources and student teaching resources. So you have access to this as a student teacher. Your cooperating teacher will also have access, as well as your GCU faculty supervisor. So I do here, this is when you log in, this is what it's going to look like. You will have a group space for you, a teacher candidate, and then your cooperating teacher also has their own space, your supervisor has their own space. But you see here, you can get education news, you can participate in some discussion. One of the things that our candidates like to do, they like to see who else might be in their area that is also student teaching with, or connect with their peers that are going through the experience in the same semester. So feel free to kind of network in this discussion area. Just remember, this is referred to as the professional learning network, and we do expect that all communication and discussion does remain professional. You will log into that website with your same username and password. If you're having any trouble, or you would just like a step-by-step of how you log in and navigate this site, we do have that resource here for you. And I apologize, this video, we recently got a new dean here in the College of Ed, Dr. Meredith Pritchfield. So we're just working on updating some of our videos now. One of our favorite things here in the Office of Clinical Practice is to partake in scoring of our Exemplary Teacher Candidate Awards. We love, love, love to see the great things that you're doing out there in the classroom. And we do award a number of candidates each semester with our Exemplary Teacher Candidate Award. So this is an application process, but if it's something that you feel you are deserving of or would like to apply for, please do. There is a deadline. All of that information is within the application process. Essentially, that application does include some additional videoing. So we'll want to see you record yourself implementing a lesson in the classroom. And then also you do provide us with a reflection on how that activity went and how you might improve. So take a look at this, and as you're going through your student teaching semester, if this is something that you would like to apply for, please do. And then last but not least, we want to inform you of our College of Education promise. You know, once we say once elope, always elope. We hope that we prepare you well to become those educators out there in the classrooms of today. But we also do understand the realities of education and the challenges that you will face as a first-time teacher, and then even years into your career. So at any point, we promise that if you're having challenges or questions and you would like assistance from us, you can email us. It's at coepromise@gcu.edu, and there is information here within these links. And you let us know what's going on, and we will help you free of charge. So, and that is, you know, if you go out there into your first year of teaching and maybe you just are finding you need some more help with a behavior issue or lesson planning, let us know, and we will kind of look at that on an individual basis and see how we can help you out. That might mean, you know, having a coaching conversation with a faculty member, or maybe having a supervisor come out to observe you and give you some tips and tricks. And that does wrap it up. I know we're just about at 12 o'clock here. I want to thank you for hanging on with me so far. We do have on this very last page a training completion verification. If you are just looking at my screen, you're not going to be able to click on this. However, if you go to the link that has been placed into the chat, and I'll have Dusty place that into the chat again, you can go to the very last page of the module. You'll click on the training completion link. It'll just pull up a page. You can go through that, electronically sign that, and that provides us with verification you've completed the orientation. You do not need to turn this document into anyone. We get all the information on the backside. So once you complete it, there's nothing else you need to do. You just can save a copy for your records. So again, that wraps it up for our presentation. Again, I know that is so much information in such a very, very quick time frame. If you have any questions, I'm happy to stay on the line. We'll have Dusty go over any questions that are in the chat box and may be pending. If you'd like to drop off at this time, I just thank you again for being in attendance with us today. And I wish you just the very best of luck in this next upcoming semester. Student teaching is often the most fun part of a student's program. So I wish you the best, and I hope you have a wonderful day. And I'm going to hand it over to Dusty if she has any pending questions there in the chat.
Wonderful. So I've been able to answer a lot of the questions in the chat. So thank you everyone for staying with us for this, long orientation and waiting till the end to ask a lot of your questions. So there has been the question of, are there different requirements for student teachers who may be in a paid position, such as a long-term substitute or a teacher of record? And no, the requirements are the same. There's just the additional element that you will need to talk with your teacher placement counselor and make sure that you fill out a teacher verification form. And that's just our documentation of assessing that the setting that you are teaching in aligns with your program of study, so that we can make sure that that is approved ahead of time. Julie,
Right.
do you want to elaborate on that at all?
Right, so there may be some of you that have the opportunity to complete the experience in your own classroom. As Dusty mentioned, there's just additional paperwork and approvals that you have to seek through your teacher placement counselor in order to do so. And then in that case, if you are approved to complete the experience in your own classroom as the full-time teacher of record, you will not have that same cooperating teacher because you'll have your own classroom, but you will have a mentor teacher, that's someone your administrator has assigned to you to just help through the experience. And that mentor teacher, yourself and the supervisor, will be the ones to have those post conferences and discuss how everything's going.
Perfect. And then next is just for our dual majors who have two different settings. Do they have the same GCU faculty supervisor for both sessions? I know that our faculty schedulers try really hard to make that happen, but each contract for the different sessions are separate. So it really depends on the situation, but they do try to ensure that the same supervisor is with you for both sessions.
Yeah, generally speaking, you would have the same supervisor, but from time to time, you might have two different ones.
Yeah. And then I've answered this question a few times in the chat, so I just want to bring it up as well. Some people are asking about, those inclement weather days. And we know that from the pandemic, a lot of districts were able to put things virtually in place. So now they have kind of their own contingency plan for those snow days. Or inclement weather days. So if you are seeing that you have an inclement weather day and your cooperating teacher, or if you're a teacher of record, you go virtually, as long as that is the contracted expectation of your cooperating teacher or you as the teacher of record, we call it mirroring. So for example, if your cooperating teacher goes virtually for the day because of inclement weather and you go virtually as well, you can count that. But on the other hand, when your cooperating teacher is in person, you must also be in person to be able to count the days. So as long as you're mirroring what their contracted expectations are, you may count those days in your time log. Did you want to elaborate on that at all, Julie?
I think you nailed it.
Okay, good. I learned from the best, Julie.
Thank you.
And another question about medical accommodations. So if you do have any accommodations that you do need to contact our Student Disability Services Department. And Julie, I don't know if I know their contact information off the top of my head.
I am not sure myself. However, that is on our GCU website. And then if you're not able to find it, simply call one of your counselors, whether it's the student service counselor, your field experience counselor, they can all provide that to you.
Yes, so our SDS or Student Disability Services Department would be able to help you with any needs of accommodations. And that looks like all the questions that we've had in the chat so far. I know we're over our time, and this was a lot of information to process, so I'm pretty sure when we get off of this and as you're thinking about it throughout the day, questions will pop into your head. Always feel free to reach out to your counselors. They're there to answer any questions that you have. And there's also, like Julie's mentioned, a lot of great resources already available to you to where you can kind of answer your own questions with our student teaching manual and all of the resources on the PLN. So please navigate to the Student Success Center on the College of Education page and your PLN for any questions that you may have as well.
Well, if that is it for questions, we'll make sure that we're respectful of everyone's time. Again, thank you so much for attending today's presentation. We do hope that we were able to provide you with some information and you feel comfortable going into this next portion of your program. So just make sure you're keeping in contact with your counselors and you're reaching out if you do have any questions. We really do want to support you through this experience so you can get on to graduation and then into those classrooms. So thank you so very much, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.